Reducing gas prices by increasing TPS, like making roads wider to reduce traffic? By Eric Wall, arcaneassets.io.
Hello everyone. I'd like to start this presentation by, let's do a show of hands. How many people in this room has used DeFi? And how many people in this room has made an Ethereum transaction? And how many people in this room has paid more than $50 to make an Ethereum transaction? And how many of you think that that's problematic? Should it cost $50 to make a transaction in DeFi? So, what I'm going to talk about today, I'm not here to market a product. I'm not here to try to sell something to you. I work for a cryptocurrency hedge fund. I've been researching the cryptocurrency space since 2011. And I'm just here to try to help you understand a concept around DeFi scalability that I think that most people get wrong. So this is essentially a picture of Ethereum right now. The roads are congested, and that is the reason why it's so costly to make transactions on Ethereum. But the reason that the roads are congested is not because the road is small, that the transaction throughput is limited. It's because there's opportunity in the system. If you had a city where there wasn't any opportunity, there was no jobs there, you wouldn't see tons of traffic congesting the roads. So what actually drives up the gas fees, the cost to make a transaction, is not the number of lanes in the freeway. It's the opportunity that exists in the system. It's the type of arbitrage opportunities that you can get. It's the type of NFT drops that you can invest in. Those people that engage in those types of activities are much more insensitive to pay very high transaction fees because they stand to gain so much more from making those transactions than the transaction fees costs. And if you know anything about road congestion, then we've known since the end of the 60s that adding more lanes to a road does not actually decrease traffic. It doesn't reduce the time it takes for you to get into your car and reach the city. And this has to do with a concept called induced demand. If it takes you only 3 minutes to get into the city and it's very cheap, very easy to drive around, then more people will try to drive on that road until the traffic situation becomes the same again. It's the same thing with internet. So even though that we have increased the bandwidth of the internet by orders of magnitude, it did not mean that the usage of the internet, like as soon as we got access to 4K streamed video, we started to use all of the traffic that was available to us. So you cannot reduce the congestion in the system by just adding more bandwidth. And this also applies to stock exchanges. 50 years ago, a stock exchange can do a couple of transactions per second. Now it can do 1 million transactions per second, but all it led to is that you had programs, machines that were making the trades, and then we got up to 100 million transactions per second that these exchanges need to execute. So why wouldn't that principle also apply to blockchains? Why wouldn't blockchains also suffer from the problem that if you increase the capacity, all that capacity will be gobbled up? You actually induce the demand by increasing the throughput. So this is the mempool of Bitcoin. So we increased the block size in Bitcoin with segregated witness in 2017, but the blocks are often still sometimes full. And it's the same thing in Ethereum, and it's even worse in Ethereum because in Bitcoin, what really you can do, what most people use Bitcoin for right now is transferring funds between exchanges and putting it into cold storage. But it's not like in Ethereum where you have the ability to buy some DeFi token for a couple of dollars, and you expect to be able to sell that token for thousands of dollars a couple of months from now. If that's the situation, then you are much more inclined to pay a $50 transaction fee. So it's about the opportunity that you create in the system. So these are the three #1 gas guzzlers in Ethereum. It's Uniswap, OpenSea, and Tether. So Uniswap, that's a decentralized exchange. The reason why people are prepared to pay a lot of money to transaction on Uniswap is because they buy these they buy tokens early on, and they expect them to go up in value. So paying a $50 transaction fees when you expect to be able to make thousands of dollars worth of profit for that transaction, it makes sense. It's the same thing with OpenSea. OpenSea is the platform where you buy NFTs. So if you have seen these NFT monkeys, they cost a couple of dollars when you buy them. And do you know what the average price is for an NFT on OpenSea right now? The average price for one NFT on OpenSea is $170,000. And people are buying them now for a couple of $100 initially, and they're expecting to be able to sell those for hundreds of thousands of dollars in the future. So of course they're going to be willing to pay $50 transaction fees. That's what's driving up the price. So can you reduce the transaction fees in DeFi just by making the road wider? That's the question. We know about the principle of induced demand. And now we have chains like Binance Smart Chain, like Avalanche, like Solana, where we've made larger roads with more lanes in them. But is that actually going to reduce the congestion in the system, or is it just going to induce more traffic? So how do we get away from the problem in DeFi where no matter how wide we make the roads, the transaction fees are going to increase and cannibalize all that supply that we have provided? So Solana is trying to solve this problem. The Solana platform is trying to solve this problem by just making the widest road possible so that as many cars as possible can drive on that road. But as time goes on and the Solana ecosystem gets as sophisticated as Ethereum, there are going to be people that compete for airdrops. There are going to be people that want to sell those airdrops, and they're prepared to pay $50 per transaction because the gain that they stand to make is so much higher than the transaction fees that they are paying. So just making a road wider does not actually decrease the transaction cost in the system. So how do we solve this problem? This is the closest graphic that I could find that describes the concept of a roll-up. Does anybody know what a roll-up is? It's an Ethereum layer 2 solution, but it can also be applied to other chains. It's a way to segregate the usage of block space into different compartments. In my language, it's called asynchronous execution environments. It basically means that you can have one mempool, and all the people in that mempool are either competing for making a trade on a decentralized exchange, but that's separated from a component where you're only trying to make regular transactions. So you don't want regular transactions to compete in the same mempool with people that are participating in NFT auctions. They're doing arbitrage trades. So it's the separation of block space demand in execution environment that actually can help us bring down the gas fees. So you cannot only look at these very high throughput chains and expect the gas fees to go down. You need a system that allows you to segregate the block usage for separate use cases, where fee-insensitive transactions do not compete with fee-sensitive transactions. And currently, the Ethereum system is the only system right now. There are a couple of other ones, but they're not as high profile, that are actually competing by building these segregated execution environments. So the idea here is that you can, using a layer 2 solution, batch thousands of transactions into a single block. And this is what creates this system where you're not actually, you have an asynchronous vehicle that runs on top of the base layer, that can run asynchronously with the rest of the traffic, and it can harmonize the fee levels in the system. So don't get deluded into thinking, like Solana, it's a short-term solution. Avalanche is a short-term solution. And do you know that the transaction fees on Binance Smart Chain, so on Avalanche, they're already going up. You have to pay $50 to transact on Binance Smart Chain today. And that's just the beginning. On Avalanche right now, you have to pay $2 per transaction. And it started out by saying that this is going to solve the gas-free problem, but the only reason that the gas fees are low right now is because there isn't as much opportunity in these systems. If there were airdrops similar to what we have in Ethereum, the situation would degrade into the same. So I'm running out of time here, so I'm not going to have time to cover all of this, exactly how rollups work, but it is a concept that I highly recommend that you look into. And don't get deluded into thinking that you can solve the scalability problem of DeFi just by making the roads wider. That's all I had. Thank you very much. If you want to get in contact with me, easiest way is Twitter. My handle is ERCWL. You can also reach me at eric@arcane.no. That's my email address. Thank you very much.